Internet friends. Today we set our sights on Chicago, America's railroad capital, the Windy City, which actually didn't get its nickname from being breezy, but because a newspaper once called out Chicago's politicians as being profit-centric or being full of hot air. Chicago is America's third largest city, a hub of innovation, architecture, and advancement. A world-class city by all these measures and should be a total haven of the United States. But instead, today we know Chicago as being a center for murder, crime, and corruption. Something strange is happening in Chicago, and I think it's time we all paid attention. Now I know other places like St. Louis and New Orleans have incredibly high homicide rates, but we're talking about the perfect storm here in Chicago, where a person is shot every 3 hours and 41 minutes, and a person is murdered every 15 hours and 54 minutes. In 2022 alone, Chicago homicides eclipsed other cities of its size and demographics, with Atlanta having 170 homicides in 2022 and Los Angeles sitting at 382, but with Chicago nearing 700. It's been reported that, statistically, citizens are more likely to be murdered in Chicago than to be killed in present-day Ukraine, where our politicians are sending foreign aid to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars every few weeks because they say the situation is so dire there. But the media barely covers these numbers because they're inconvenient and not agenda-friendly. In Chicago, the violence is primarily black-on-black violence, even with the toughest gun control laws in the country. And the majority of victims are black men under 25. Democrat Mayor Lori Lightfoot took over President Obama's city in 2019. She's been at the head of efforts to defund the police while having armed guards outside her home on the daily. Lightfoot implemented policies of greater government top-down control during the 2020 lockdowns, pressuring the masses to get risky medical treatments to regain their freedoms. And Lightfoot also introduced a universal basic income pilot program, with select citizens who applied for the program receiving $500 of guaranteed income monthly, which to me, what do I know, sounds a lot like government welfare. Under Lightfoot, crime has surged exponentially in Chicago. It's basically a meme now. So Lightfoot ran for re-election, she came in third, and now someone way worse is replacing her. Which is kind of hard to imagine someone way worse, but here we are. The mayor-elect is Democrat Brandon Johnson, who is very much picking up where Lightfoot left off. He's for defunding the police and defends looting as an outbreak of incredible frustration and anguish tied to a failed racist system. His words. I see him as a typical agent appealing to the pain and frustration of a disenfranchised populace who weaponizes them against their own interests and their own benefit to further a political agenda that is more focused on acquisition, expansion, and the consolidation of power, leaving manipulated citizens to worship at the altar of big government. News coming out of Chicago in the last week or so involves Walmart's departure from the third world pocket of our country. Walmart, who's a big old Democrat donor, says that there are decades of financial losses in Chicago. And they're closing 4 out of the 8 Walmarts in Chicago because basically the looters are such a problem. Let's take a look.
Look at this. Came in the store to try to buy something because I'm not a thief. Look at this. In my hood, can't even get no food for my kids. I feel like an animal, and black people make me feel like an animal. Y'all did this to us. Look at this. Look at this to us.
What you're witnessing is our chickens come home to roost. Those people are the end result of the baby mama culture when they kick the man out of the house. No discipline, no structure, just take whatever they want, do whatever they want, and they don't care who gets hurt. That's what we're fighting against. You see the end result and the pain that it causes to our own people and everyone else.
We're seeing this trend across metropolitan areas like San Francisco, Seattle, LA, with the decriminalization of looting and theft. In nearly every city ran by these agents of chaos, crime is on the rise. Undoubtedly, the Hegelian dialectic is at play. As we saw during the COVID fallout, there was this whole uptick in online shopping and curbside shopping and digital payments and so on. I believe one aspect, not the main aspect, is an effort to close down all these retail stores, both large corporate stores and small businesses, so only those with the money and infrastructure to support online shopping and curbside shopping can survive. Meaning Walmart's and Amazon will be the only ballgame in town, with each purchase tracked digitally. And it's really starting to remind me of the plot of RoboCop, a sci-fi film that was released in 1987. The film is set in a crime-ridden Detroit in the near future, and there's a corporation called Omni Consumer Products that has taken over the police force and plans to replace human officers with robots. It's a movie that really centers around corporate greed and corporate control of the government. And on a somewhat related note, it just so happens that this week, New York officials unveiled 3 new digital policing devices, one being a robotic dog, a digi-dog, a digi-police dog, which I think we saw in an episode of Black Mirror. But back to the main event. The real story is that the trend of lawlessness reared its head this weekend when crowds of young Black people unleashed chaos on downtown Chicago. Smashing and breaking anything in their path, firing off guns. Some people died, some people got injured, filming themselves beating up a white woman, which certainly would have made headlines had the roles been reversed. And it got so bad out there that Fox 32 Chicago reported that it was unsafe to keep their news crew on the scene. So let's take a look at some of that footage.
Lightfoot says there's lots of opportunity to redirect young people to safe spaces, but scoffed at one reporter describing what happened as, quote, mayhem.
And here's the thing, the vast majority of the young people that came downtown because it was a great weather and an opportunity to enjoy the city. That's absolutely entirely appropriate. There are a few that came with different intentions, and they have and they will be dealt with. But I'm not going to use your language, which I think is wrong, to say that is mayhem.
It should be noted that neither Mayor Lightfoot nor Mayor-elect Brandon Johnson condemned any of these events. In fact, Johnson said, "We can't, quote, demonize youth who have been otherwise starved of opportunities," end quote. I'm going to end this video with my analysis of these strange happenings in Chicago and also leave you with some lingering questions. I would definitely say it's not a tale of one city, it's not a tale of 2 cities, it's a tale of every major city in America. And Chicago is really leading the pack. So why does it seem like there is a coordinated effort in every major US city to allow all this crime to take place? Why aren't the prosecutors doing their jobs and trying to prosecute violent criminals? Why did they empty prisons of violent criminals during COVID and fill them instead with political prisoners? And more importantly, why are victims of these crimes being blamed? We can't talk about Chicago and maintain the facade of political correctness. We're watching phony groups like Black Lives Matter weaponize pain and weaponize groups against their own interests. The fact is that the family unit, especially in the Black demographics of these inner cities, are virtually non-existent. There is a growing trend not amongst just Black youth, but all youth. Think about the transgender movement, where there is no strong role model. These children are growing up without traditional values, without identity, and then clinging on to whatever identity the media or pop culture ran by the government gives them. We're watching a historical trend reemerge of young people losing their places and purpose in society. The classless masses, as they were once called. Those who made up the masses were isolated and angry individuals. Their pain was weaponized. They felt disenfranchised. But they became united and motivated by an ideology that distorts history to fit the reality of the political movement being forced upon these masses. And the real agenda of the movement is expansion, attaining and maintaining power. I'm watching the Hegelian dialectic in real time, problem, reaction, solution. And then I'm watching the other side respond to the crime taking place in these cities, these Republicans saying, oh, we should send in the military to these cities. We should impose martial law to get this under control. So they've effectively gotten you to ask for more government control, more government intervention, even though it's the government who enabled and in many instances caused these problems in the first place. So anyone who becomes part of the classless masses in this kind of movement becomes less human and more like a cog in the machine, a pawn on the global chessboard. Free thought and autonomy go by the wayside as they become part of the machine. And then the system deploys repetition and terror, the repeated and casual use of violence that numbs people to it and adds to the dehumanizing aspect between these groups. But you don't really need to know any of that because it just boils down to family. They used to provide a sense of purpose and confidence and set an example of traditional values that benefited the individual as well as the collective. Our jobs used to provide a sense of pride and purpose, but now our families are fractured. Our jobs have been consolidated under the soulless corporations, and we're seen as disposable. And those factors, combined with a lack of community, lack of personal responsibility and sense of self, no meaningful connections with others, that is the primary target of a government who seeks to recruit individuals for its agenda. Ultimately, we have failed to keep government power in check. Totally failed. There's no voting your way out of this. So if I were you, I'd stay out of the cities and definitely out of Chicago. What do you think, internet friends? You know I always look forward to your comments. Thank you so much for watching, subscribing, supporting my channel on Patreon, and also for purchasing my book, The Deep State Encyclopedia. Bye!